we want to take you to this. Darin Gaub, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, former Black Hawk helicopter pilot and battalion commander, also co-founder of Executive Director of Restore Liberty. Darin, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Your thoughts on what we've been watching transpire here this morning?
Yeah, I think one of the things that sticks out to me most, Martha, is the fact that these world leaders are starting to talk to President Trump in the absence largely of the Biden White House and Harris, who's on the campaign trail, who's not engaging on anything either. So they're coming to talk to President Trump because they see a road ahead where the future seems to lead towards a potential Trump presidency, and they want to be able to hedge their bets and say, you know, we need to be able to talk to him and get things started quickly if he occupies the White House again come January of next year. And I think that's just going to continue as the Biden-Harris White House largely disappears from the world stage and in many ways disappears from the domestic stage right now as well.
He did meet with the vice president yesterday. She said that she stands by Ukraine, that she will continue to support them militarily, and will, something along the lines of stand by indefinitely in this situation. In terms of what I find interesting is the language around talking at this point, that there is, it feels, on all sides, because earlier President Zelenskyy was very dug in, saying that he would only accept the reclaiming of Crimea and Donetsk and Luhansk and all of the areas that had been taken over by Russia. Do you think there's flexibility on that now? What's your take?
I think he's realizing that he doesn't have a choice. He has to display some flexibility towards that because he's got to live in the real world. And this is a war that started out with Russia having a 5-to-1 advantage over most every, whether it be people or weapons and economies. And that's just the reality that he's going to have to work through. And he knows that. So I think there's always going to be this willingness now for people to realize that they have to talk in order to end these wars, because both sides right now don't seem to be on the verge of anything that looks like a clear victory. And this is just the way forward now. What really, along the lines of what does Trump do? He's going to come in and say, we've got to be able to find a way to make a deal.
Yeah, as I said, so many people have been killed in this horrific war that started several years ago now. I want to talk to you a little bit about Israel. We just heard from Benjamin Netanyahu earlier today, and their defense forces continue to strike Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. The terror group has been firing missiles at Tel Aviv and Haifa. These are areas that we have not seen this kind of kinetic action in, and it is a very frightening situation. Israel has mobilized additional troops on their northern border. The prime minister has sent mixed messages over a U.S.-led proposal for a 21-day ceasefire across the Israel-Lebanon border. And last hour, he laid out quite clearly at the United Nations Israel's mission.
Hezbollah is the quintessential terror organization in the world today. It has tentacles that span in all continents. It has attacked Israel viciously over the last 20 years. In the last year, completely unprovoked. I said to the people of Lebanon this week, get out of the death trap that Hezbollah has put you in. Don't let Nasrallah drag Lebanon into the abyss. We're not at war with you. We're at war with Hezbollah, which has hijacked your country and threatens to destroy ours. As long as Hezbollah chooses the path of war.
Colonel, we look at these images right now. Israel strikes Hezbollah targets in northern Lebanon. This is before and after some of the recent strikes on their targets. The increased hostilities continue to raise a lot of fears about a wider regional conflict. Here's one headline today: Middle East moves toward full-scale war, with Biden and Congress heading for the exits on this. President Biden is already on his way to Delaware for the weekend. Both chambers of Congress are out of session until after the election now, which is extraordinary. I'm going to talk to Speaker Mike Johnson later on at 3 o'clock on this story. But, your take on how this is being handled, Colonel.
Well, unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be handled by the White House at all, and maybe not even very well. So that is my top concern with everybody vacating Washington, D.C. But In the end, I don't think that's going to drive the decision cycle of Bibi Netanyahu and the Israeli people to do what they need to do in order to achieve the goals that Netanyahu's laid out, which is return the Israeli people back to the northern regions of Israel where they were removed from at the beginning of this conflict. And he seems to be willing to engage with this 21-day ceasefire as an idea because he agrees with the aims of moving the Israelis there and achieving a peace even potentially with Hezbollah itself. But he's not willing to give Hezbollah 21 days just to seek advantage in the process of a ceasefire in the first place. So that's critical. And he made it very clear in his speech as well that Israel has the ability to reach out to multiple nations throughout the Middle East. And he clearly said that if they strike Israel, Israel will strike back. And so he is not willing to give up any of the advantage that Israel has gained through the process of what they've been doing to decapitate the leadership of Hezbollah inside Lebanon. And I don't blame him for doing that.
Yeah, it's been very effective. He talked about how much progress he feels they've made against Hamas and Hezbollah and the leadership and hitting these entities where they strike from. Thank you very much, Colonel Darin Gaub. Thank you very much for being here today.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.